on. Let me find all my notes from where I was assailing Chip last week. I don't. So I don't take notes. I just. I know. I give the people what they want. Welcome into the Ben Burnett Show. My name is Ben Burnett. My guest today is premier GOP statewide, nationwide consultant, Chip Lake. Chip, welcome in.
It's a pleasure to be here, Ben. Thank you for having me.
Chip is a long-standing GOP, I would say operative, but that makes you sound like you're clandestine. You're a very involved guy in the legislature. You're a household name among the Republican Party. You have run some massive races. Some wind up a little bit better than others.
Indeed.
But talk to me real quick about your background, about how, where you grew up, those types of things. You're a Carson Newman tennis alumni, which is something that we have bonded over tremendously. You love BMX racing, NASCAR, and tennis, which
that's right.
There's no other person in the world that likes those three things. Yep. And football.
Yep. Yeah, not a whole lot of people know that I went to Carson Newman. I only went there a year up in Jefferson City, Tennessee, but played tennis for them. And then I had bursitis bent in both of my shoulders and ended up tearing a rotator cuff and had to get surgery. I'm a lefty, so my serve became about 60 to 70% of what it was before the shoulder injury, and it wasn't real good before then. So the reality is, at that point in time, there was no reason for me to stay at Carson Newman, and I transferred to Auburn University, which many people do know about.
You're not shy.
I'm not shy. I'm very engaged, an Auburn fan, a very frustrated Auburn fan most of the time in the fall. But went to Auburn and got out in '96, which ages me a little bit. When you introduced me as a longtime political operative, I think the translation was he's old, and you're right. You're exactly right. I am. And then got involved in politics at Auburn. I was in the college Republicans.
Which I would guess that's the only party represented on campus.
Now it's a little bit more diverse, but back in the late 90s, a very conservative, still is a very conservative student body. I can't remember. I don't recall the college Democrats being all that organized on campus.
The 7 of them were just pissed.
That's right. But I actually got into politics because the chairman of the state Republican Party in Georgia at the time was a guy by the name of Rusty Paul, who's the Sandy Springs mayor. And Rusty's daughter was at Auburn. I think she was a freshman when I was a junior or a senior. I was a senior twice at Auburn.
So, good for you, man. You did it right.
Yeah, that's right. I extended one more football season, and he came down to speak to our group, and I just asked him if he had an internship available. And unfortunately, he said yes, and the rest is history. And I was a political science, public administration major, and it was politics was always something that interested me. Campaigns and elections was always something that interested me. And so many, many decades later, here I am still in the business.
Talk to me real quick about how you sort of navigate that transition into professional life, because I didn't know. I remember plain as day when I said I was going to run for city council, and our city administrator sent me an email. And I thought, who the hell is this guy? I had no idea that outside of the cops and the police department that it wasn't. It's not that I'm right or wrong. Most people are like me. They have no idea you have a giant professional staff of people that actually do things on a daily basis. So talk to me about how you navigate that into professional life, because I think there are a lot of people that are interested in public service that think that being an elected official is the only way. How do you get that first job?
Oh gosh, Look, it's much like anything else. You go in, you keep your head down, you do a good job, and you have to get into this business knowing that that income is going to be seasonal. And you're not going to get a job and keep that job at 9 to 5 for 10, 15 years. It's every campaign cycle has different opportunities for people, different challenges, different ways to make money. And as crazy as it sounds, Ben, you get used to that. It's
You squirrel a lot of nuts away.
yeah. I mean, you get used to what we call the chaos. I always kind of call campaigns and elections controlled chaos, because it has to be chaos, because that's the nature of the beast. But you do your best. You do the best you can to control it.
So I guess when you start Googling your bio, you have you were the chief of staff for a longtime congressman. How do you get from dabbling in campaigns to literally running one of 455's office?
Oh, it's a good question. So,
and tell us about that experience.
Yeah, it was a good question. So, I was chief of staff for Lynn Westmoreland, who represented the 3rd Congressional District of Georgia, and I was his chief of staff for six and a half years.
That's a long run.
It is a long run, and he got elected in 2004, and at the time, making sure I get my years right, since that was a long time ago. I had just moved back a few years earlier from Washington, D.C., and I was working for Lynn Westmoreland in the 3rd Congressional District, and then worked for Tom Price in the 6th Congressional District, because there was an open Senate seat up that cycle. And Zell Miller had announced January in the off year, very early, that he was not going to seek re-election. And so Matt Collins, who represented the 3rd District, and Johnny Isakson, who represented the 6th District, both made decisions very early in that cycle that they were going to run for U.S. Senate, a seat that Johnny Isakson ultimately won. So that created open seats in Tom Price's district and Matt Collins' district, and I was fortunate enough to get 2 really good clients. They were very different clients, very different individuals, different strengths, different weaknesses, but worked for Tom and worked for Lynn, and they both ended up winning their races and going to Congress. And Lynn asked me, upon winning, he said, "Would you be interested in becoming my chief of staff?" And I really hadn't thought about it a whole lot.
Did you say, did you know I actually know nothing about this?
Yeah, I actually did have that conversation with him. I have no experience in a congressional office, and I agreed to do it for 1 year. I said, I'll be more than happy to come in, help you get up and running, help you get staffed up. I'll go back and forth. There was another member of Congress at the time who represented the 9th Congressional District by the name of Nathan Deal, and his chief of staff was a guy by the name of Chris Riley, and Chris was actually the one who was telling me and telling Lynn, look, this will work. I commute back and forth, and he did, because I didn't want to move to D.C. I'd already lived in D.C. and been there, done that, gotten the T-shirt, and wanted to live down here. I just got married. My wife just had our first child, and I didn't want to live in Northern Virginia or Washington, D.C., so commuted back and forth. There, at the time, before COVID, there were 14 flights a day from Atlanta to Washington, D.C. I think that's there's a few less flights today, but it was really easy to get up and back. And so about 36 weeks a year, for 6 years, I went up and back and kept a base of operation down here.
Where did you live on the Hill?
I didn't have a place. I lived wherever. Whatever hotel had the closest government rate. And so, I would spend 3 nights a week there, and we were able, it was an official expense, obviously, so we were able to put it on the MRA. And so what I would do, what I learned the second year is when the congressional calendar would come out, I would spend 3 or 4 hours, and I would book hotels for the whole year. at the lowest government rate, because if you wait to book hotels,
it gets expensive.
DC, it gets very expensive. Even the government rate can crawl to $400 or $500 a night in the summer months, because everybody's visiting Washington D.C. So wherever I could get the lowest government rate is where I ended up staying. So there were 7, 8, 9 hotels around Northern Virginia and Washington D.C. And
you didn't even have a car.
No, I was all cabs and Metro.
So, funny story. One of the only tickets that I have ever received is in Washington D.C. for jaywalking, and it was my own fault because I was an asshole.
Well, that happens.
And I was up there. I was 17, and I was crossing the street. And the guy was like, "You have to wait on a crosswalk sign." And for those of you who don't know, if you go to Washington, D.C., it is the most pedestrian-focused and friendly city in the country.
Sure.
Like, people will stop their cars if they see somebody out in the road. And I told the cop, and he was like, "You got to wait for that." I was like, "What are you going to do, write me a ticket?" And he was like, "Yeah, come here.
Come over here." Yeah.
So I don't even remember. I'm sure I paid it because
I'm sure you did.
That sounds like me, but I was like, I didn't envision this going this way.
Nope.
Not with the crime in that town.
No, that's right.
What are you really proud of from that time there? And before you, what pieces of legislation are you proud of? What are things that Lynn wanted to do that he was really behind? Because he represented, I think it's Columbus. Is it?
We represented part of Columbus. Yeah, Sanford Bishop represented the other part of
and
Columbus.
And
still does. But we represented part of Columbus. I mean, wow. Lynn was one, Ben, and he still is, who complex casework he would really sink his teeth into. And, a lot of times members don't do that, right? I mean, anytime a constituent has an issue with the federal government, any agency whatsoever, they call their member of Congress, and it's the job of the caseworkers and the constituent services reps to make certain that they get on whatever issue that is. We would always end up having complex constituent service issues, very unique issues with agencies. And I just remember, the 6 years that I was working for Lynn, those would really frustrate him. And he would get personally involved in them, so much so that, a lot of times when we would have individuals from the agencies come over to meet with us about a case, they're used to meeting with staff. Mm-hmm. And Lynn would like to sit in those meetings. And we would tell, many times we would tell the individuals, the member's going to sit in, and they wouldn't believe us. And then the member, would have personal knowledge on, issues on the case and what went on. I remember there was a case where we had a constituent that had his King Air confiscated. King Air.
It's a private airplane for those of you playing at home.
And we didn't know at the time, but at the time, I don't know if anything's changed, but it was I don't know if anything's changed, but the FAA is not allowed to seize aircraft. There's only two federal agencies that are. It's DEA and ICE. And so anytime the FAA can ground an aircraft, but they cannot seize an aircraft, take it off of the property, fly it out. And so anytime the FAA wants to come seize an aircraft, they have to get DEA or ICE to come do that. So they did that in this case. And I remember it was the end of our first year. It was between Christmas and New Year's. And he called me, and I'm not going to mention the constituent's name, but he called me and he said,
Do we know who that?
Well, probably not. Probably not. But you could probably Google him and maybe learn about this case. It was a case that was a long case, took a year. But he said, "Hey, man, we need to get on this issue. They took this constituent's plane." He said the DEA took his plane, and my first thought was, well, he shouldn't be running drugs back and forth to Mexico.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then the more we looked into the case, the more it was like, no, they really can't do this. He ended up purchasing a plane from a guy who harvested the aircraft in another state, and then that plane applied for another permit, and then the original manufacturer of the aircraft saw that the plane applied for a permit and said, "Wait a second, this plane is grounded. It can't apply for a permit. It's no longer flying." And so the manufacturer brought the case to the FAA and said, not only should you not issue this permit, you need to ground this aircraft because you took the airworthiness certificate away. And so the FAA realized they made a mistake by reissuing the airworthiness certificate to the previous owner of the aircraft, and they spent a year trying to back themselves out of that. And it's just a small example of of cases that Lynn would get into. I remember we also had a 2-year-old little boy who had a rare medical condition, and it was a fatal diagnosis, and there was only one procedure that could possibly save this child's life. And the procedure was it was conducted at Duke University Medical Center. So we contacted both the senators from North Carolina and the member of Congress that represented the Durham area, Durham, North Carolina, to try to see if we could get one of our constituents in to get this experimental surgery. Unfortunately, the child passed before we could do that, but we were very, very close to getting that accomplished. And it's just I know it's a long-winded answer, but what the thing that I'm most proud of, from working with Lynn was all the work that he really did in constituent services. He rolled up his sleeves, and it bothered him when the federal government created problems for the people that he represented. I'm sure you can relate to that, being an elected official as well.
It is interesting, but when you find something at a local level, and you're going to know this. When you step out of the vast majority of the things that you do on a day-to-day as one of the 500 and change members of Congress is not partisan work.
Sure, that's right.
And, I think it's probably the thing that I'm the most proud of. Never reach the paper, but there was a local high school teacher here that had been stuck in Africa for 30 days. And she knew that a couple years prior that I didn't know me, knew that or had read that I had adopted a child in China, and came home and she said, "I don't know." She said, "I'm reaching into Senator Isaacson and Perdue's offices and they're busy. Can you help?" And I sit there and I'm like, well, I remember that vividly, because you don't unremember those kinds of things.
Sure.
If you're going through a foreign thing. And I called Lucy McBath as well, who didn't know, none of them really knew me from a hole in the wall. Perdue did somewhat, enough to know that I knew how to find a chief of staff or somebody, and I knew how to get Derek Dickey to call me back. Right. And so I had done that, but McBath's office was great. I mean, and that was look, I'm not voting for her.
Yeah.
But that's your job on a day-to-day basis.
Exactly
and
right.
if those people have the ability to navigate and find you, and it really, you see that they actually do care. They have 500,000 things to care about, but once you get the right person's attention, and it's not that they can make the federal government quit being the federal government, because it still sucks.
That's exactly right. And I tell you, when I put Lynn's initial staff together, we ended up acquiring, I think, at least two full-time members of Matt Collins' constituent services staff, and I've also experienced. I mean, I went through orientation with all the other members that came in when Lynn came in, and there were a few chiefs of staff who were whose members had defeated Democrats or had won an open seat where a Democrat used to serve. and a few of them, you're not going to hire your legislative staff. That's very partisan. But your constituent services staff that are here,
They're just people.
They're not partisan at all. And I remember a lot of those incoming chiefs of staff ended up acquiring and hiring the former members.
They had the relationships.
They had the relationships. They had the relationships with the agencies. And you know what? As a constituent services representative, you're going to deal with the same people, whether it's a Republican that represents that office or a Democrat, because if you have an issue with the federal government, let's say with a VA benefit or a Medicaid or a Medicare claim or an IRS issue, you don't care if your member of Congress is a Democrat or Republican. You just want the problem. You just want help getting the problem solved, and you're exactly right.
It's funny. I remember, and I wouldn't have thought of this, but my dad is retired military, and something had happened where a doctor's office quit. They wouldn't accept it as a form of insurance that our congressman at the time was John Linder, and my mom just called and was like, "My husband is a retired officer in the United States Marine Corps. And you're telling him that he can't get X, Y, or Z." And he called. He called him and was like, "This will go away.
Wow.
I will make this go away."
Sure.
And so kudos to him. That's a great guy.
Yes.
But that's interesting. Well, when you look at moving out of, I'll say that's the light side. For your average person at home, it should scare you to death that Washington, D.C. is run by 25-year-old kids.
Yes.
And that is in no
it
way,
is.
it's scary.
Yeah, it is.
Like, wait, you make policy decisions?
Yeah.
When you decide to step away, what drives that? And then you clearly pick up, you begin consulting. Did you sit out for a while? What did you do?
No, so I ended up leaving. Lynn's office in April of 2011, and I just went to him a few months beforehand, and I said,
"It's time."
Yeah, I just said, "Look, it's time for somebody else to come in." I said, "You need somebody that is." I just felt like I'd been like a football coach at a football institution for 10 years. It was just time. I had gotten stale. My kids were getting older. I had two little boys at the time, so I was missing a lot at home in the evenings when I was in D.C. on Tuesday through Thursday. So I just went to him a couple months before I ended up making the announcement to leave, and I said, "Look, I don't know how much longer I can do this. I think it's time we thought about who you want to kind of take my place when I end up moving on." And we had identified an individual as district director, a guy named Brad Bohannon, who's a really good guy and a good friend of mine, and who went on to serve as Lynn's chief of staff for a couple years. And I think now he works with the lottery. Went to work for EMC, I think, and then now works for the lottery. And so
they all take bureaucrat jobs, but you.
No, that's right. So I got, I was looking to do a hybrid between campaigns and government affairs type stuff. And then I ended up working.
That's code word for lobbyist.
It is, but I never lobbied. I never lobbied. I had a lot of friends of mine, and still do, that are lobbyists that do a great job, and I didn't want to compete with them. Nor did I think I was going to be very good at it. I mean, they're good at it. I thought I could work with them if they ever had a client who might have an issue where they need to kind of litigate that issue in the public domain and argue on behalf of their client's position and spend some money to communicate with voters and persuade voters and things like that. And
I love how you make that sound like it's an above board process.
Of course it is. Of course it is. And so I ended up in 2012. So I got out 2011. I ended up meeting a state representative at the time who was Governor Deal's floor leader, who by the name of Doug Collins.
I know Doug.
By the name of Doug Collins, and ended up doing Doug's race that cycle.
That was your first one after you were out?
After I was out. That was the first one after I was out. I had done Tom Price's race and Lynn's race before I went in, and then did Doug's after I got out. And that was a competitive primary with Martha Zoller. And Doug ended up obviously winning and going to Congress and then running for Senate last year. And I was happy to do his race for Senate, excuse me, in 2020. And then, 2018 did Did Jeff Duncan's race for lieutenant governor.
We'll get there. We're not there yet.
Okay, yeah.
Can we? I want to step back because Tom Price is a near and dear friend of mine and to this community. Can you talk about what was attractive to? How did you guys get connected? And what drew him? To me, he is as good a retail politician to represent the Republican Party in North Fulton for sure that you could draw. He knows issues. He's a very educated man.
Machine. He's a machine.
He probably wishes that he hadn't necessarily gone to work for the Trump administration, but I would let him tell that story.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, look, I believe I got connected with him through a guy by the name of Jared Thomas, who you probably know, who is a very successful lobbyist now, good friend of mine, very close to this governor. Jared ended up managing that race, and I was the general consultant. And so I think he connected us. And I really enjoyed working for Tom. He's
tireless.
Yeah, and I don't know that I've ever worked with a candidate quite like him. I mean, he was, he was, I guess the easiest way to say it, he was the one person that I've worked with in 20 years who you really wanted at the table in a discussion on strategy. Because Tom had a lot of ideas, and not all of them were good ideas, but a lot of them were damn good ideas. And he also didn't get his feelings hurt, when you'd say, Tom, that's a bad idea. He'd just be like, okay, well, I mean, what's your idea? And he challenged you too to okay, well, if this isn't a good idea, Chip, what is a good idea? And he was an absolute. Not only his work ethic was second to none, but he was a producer. I mean, he would grind on the calls. He'd make the fundraising calls. He'd do the He'd do the political events. He'd do the media. And as I said, he was just a machine. He was fun to work with, and
and he's a doctor.
And he's not a doctor. He's a surgeon. And there's a difference, And he's just a grinder. I mean, he would do anything you asked him to do, and he was relentlessly focused on winning, and I appreciated that. I mean, as a consultant, there's nothing more you can ask for than a candidate who is relentlessly focused on winning, and that was Tom Price.
Well, this episode of the Ben Burnett Show is brought to you by Chiringa. This beach food elevated. If you go to downtown City Center, it's one of the only affordable places where you can get fresh seafood daily. And if you will leave a review on my podcast, Carl told me not to do this. If you will leave a review on my podcast, I will send you a $25 gift card. If you will give me DM me your address, I'll make it happen. I mean, and if
Carl did tell you not to do that.
Carl,
you're not a good listener.
Carl,
sometimes.
the first thing he said is, "Do not tie those two things together." I don't care. But they also have a delicious frosé if you're looking to get liquored up out on the town. Man, there's nothing better, especially when it gets hot. Oh, so good.
But don't drive on the streets of Alpharetta after you do that.
We don't drive anymore in Alpharetta. Right. We all walk everywhere.
That's right.
There's literally no traffic because everyone walks. It's walkable.
Walks. That's great.
Well, so as you get those first couple of races, you also have we have a mutual friend named Rick Allen.
Indeed.
Who is a gentleman that you have put into Congress. Did you run the Barrow race?
No, in full disclosure, I did not put him into Congress. In full discusure, I ran the race that he lost. So,
they redrew the lines enough.
I ran the race that he lost, but I ran the first race, and we were... we found ourselves in a primary with Lee Anderson, who was the nominee at the time, who defeated Rick in the runoff election, and then a guy by the name of Wright McLeod, and Rick and Wright were competing against each other for the same voters, and we knew we needed to get ourselves into a runoff election, and we knew that Lee Anderson was going to be in the runoff election, and he was going to be the top vote getter. But we we had to focus most of our attention in most of the race on Wright McLeod, and Rick ended up beating Wright to get into the runoff. But if my memory serves me correctly, I think that was I believe that was the last cycle that we had 3-week runoffs, and it just wasn't enough time to kind of transition and run a different race, and we fell just short in that race. Lee was the nominee, and went on to unfortunately lose to John Barrow. And then the next cycle was when
he decided to pick up a real
yeah,
consultant.
that's right. And I actually remember going down, and Rick put in $250,000 of his own money in the race that he lost, and I remember going down to Augusta and me with him because he was thinking about running again, and I said, Rick, I don't think you should do it again. And he said, why not? And I said, because this race cost you $250,000. If you're going to run again, it's likely going to cost you another $250,000. And if you run, there's going to be two scenarios. One of two scenarios. You're either going to win or you're going to lose. And if you win, I don't think you're going to enjoy Congress, because Rick is very much a pragmatic problem solver, and that's not a great place to be if that's what you enjoy, right? Congress is a place where problems don't get solved, where problems exist for decades. And I was wrong on both of those items because Rick loves it, and he's doing a good job, and I'm proud of him. And he's
a great guy.
He is a great guy, but he did put more money in. Thankfully, he ended up winning. So I haven't looked at his disclosures lately. I'm assuming he retired all that debt. I certainly hope he did, because he had the opportunity to do that because he won.
Well, as you move a little bit further down the road, we have somebody in Georgia that we all know. Was Jeff Duncan the first time he ran a statewide race, like as the general consultant?
You know what? Yes, he was. But most of the races that I had run before Jeff were congressional and legislative.
So you knew all the districts.
Sure. But it was the first statewide race. I think that's right.
How does that relationship form? And I'll be 100% honest with you. I won't say they're friends. I know people in the General Assembly that were very surprised to see him file to run for a seat like that,
Sure.
following a guy like Casey, who, I won't say he was a swamp creature if there ever was one, but that man knew the game.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
And by all accounts, a rank and file state house member is not your likely, like Sam Nunn doesn't grow on trees.
That's right.
Talk to me about your first interactions with him, how that comes about.
My first interactions with Jeff Duncan? Yeah, I was connected with him through Rick Jackson Healthcare up here in North Fulton County, and I believe that Jeff was Rick's legislative representative at the state level.
Mm-hmm.
And
this is true.
And he had said, "Look, I want you to meet this guy," and we ended up meeting, if my memory serves me correct, at a diner in Marietta. He'd come over Marietta Diner, actually, on Highway 41. They have some of the best pies and cakes in
we don't
Atlanta.
You got to put skin in the game.
That's
to
right.
get some airtime.
I got you. That's right. And I remember thinking we had a good meeting, and I remember thinking, this guy's impressive. And he's articulate. He's got the look. He's young. He's got energy. He was naive, but you know what? That in many respects is an asset, because
You can tell him anything.
Well, it's not that you could tell him anything. It's that if you had pointed it out at the premise when you asked the question about David was, if you're not going to run against David Schaefer if you're not naive, because of how strong David is, how strong David plays the internal game. A tremendous amount of respect for how David handles that, like caucus politics and transactional politics. I mean, David was the best at it, and I didn't even realize how good he was till I ran a race against him. And Jeff also he had something in that meeting that a lot of guys don't have. He's like, look, I'm going to kick the tires on this, and I'm going to give it a shot. And if I win, I think I can do good for the state. And if I lose, I'm still going to have a wife and a family that loves me, and I'm still going to have an opportunity to do what I'm doing in business. And it was kind of refreshing, right? To kind of see somebody that really just felt like he had nothing to lose.
Yep.
And that's part of what attracted me to it. And I knew it was a long shot. It was the longest of long shots. And I knew that he knew that he was a long shot as well. And that was important. And so, I told him for months, I want to help you, but I don't want to do your race as a consultant. And then 5, 6, 7 months down the road, I was doing this race as a consultant. And so just kind of backed into it, really, Ben, to be honest with you. And it was a hell of a ride.
Well, talk to me about that, because you guys made it into a runoff barely.
Oh, yes, that's correct.
I mean, it couldn't have been, I don't know how many thousands of votes separated that from being a nothing and being to where it was a 3-person race.
It was.
And it still, he still almost outright took it. And to be 100% honest with you, David Schaefer is a good friend of mine.
Sure.
And I supported him. I think he, we have some disagreements. I would love to get the two of you to sit down in here, because that would be awesome. That would be great television. But talk to me about, so you monitor absolutely everything and something like that. Did you know that you were going to get into a runoff?
Well, we knew going into, or we thought going into the election, that it would be in a runoff. And we knew David was going to be the top vote getter. Rick Jeffries, who was the third candidate in that race, he and his team knew that David Schaefer would be the top vote getter. And I really thought our data showed that he was going to be in the low 40s. David would be in the low 40s, and that the remainder of the votes would be split between Rick Jeffries and Jeff Duncan. And our data showed that we would likely be in second, but it was going to be close. And as the election results started coming in that night, David was in the high 40s.
Very high.
Very high 40s. And that was problematic for us. So we had two issues going on election night. Number one, we needed to make certain that David stayed under 50. Because if he didn't stay under 50, it really didn't matter if we were going to come in second place. And then secondly, we needed to come in second place. And maybe when a third of the votes in or 40% of the votes were in, I think Rick had a lead on us. We were at a hotel over here. I believe it was in Alpharetta. I can't remember the hotel, but it was within walking distance of a Brewster's ice cream place. And I remember just getting up around, when the first votes started coming in and we were in third place, I just left to go get an ice cream cone. And I remember going, damn it, we're gonna fall. We might fall just short. And then, it wasn't until in the wee hours of the morning that we knew, or we felt certain about two things. Number one, that David would be held under 50. And number two, that Jeff would come in second place.
You had a race to run tomorrow.
And we had a race to run tomorrow, and it was going to be a 9-week race, and it was going to be very, very difficult, and it was. It was, electorally, it was one of the most difficult 9-week runoffs, are probably the most difficult that I've ever been a part of. I mean, David Schaefer got 48.9% of the vote, and we were at 26.3 or 4.
That's a hell of a delta.
We had a lot of delta to catch up on. So we needed to do everything right, and we needed to catch some breaks.
How did you, when you talk about that over 9 weeks, what breaks do you feel like you caught, and what did you guys do well? There was, for a lieutenant governor's race, and granted, it's not really, what I'm about to say is not a fair statement because Casey held it for so long. Where on earth did there were so many resources thrown into that race. Do you feel like it was, and you probably don't know to some degree, but I have to feel like there were people that clearly didn't want to see David Schaefer have any sort of elected life. And that seemed to be the overarching theme behind, because it was, I mean, millions, and it might have even got to 5.
It was a big effort. It was an effort that did not really exist in the primary. It was an effort that only really existed in the runoff, Ben. And look, there were also a lot of people and donors that wanted to help us. They wanted to help Jeff. And in talking to Rick Jeffries people, I mean, there were a lot of their supporters ran into the same thing, but they didn't want to be on the bad side of the race. I mean, everybody always wants to be with a winner. And if you're just looking at that race on paper, it looked like the whole time, with the exception of maybe the last 10 to 14 days, that there was no way that David Schaefer could lose this race. Now, I will say this in David's defense, in the primary, not in his defense in the runoff, but in his defense in the primary, he left money in the bank.
You never do that.
Well,
no. If
you never do that in a runoff,
yes,
I can't say that I wouldn't have made the same decision.
It's hard to get 50.
That's right.
It's hard.
It's very hard, and no data show that there's a lot of undecideds in the race. There's not a tremendous amount of money to really saturate the TV airways. So David was able to go up on TV and do broadcast television, but I think only at 1,000 gross rating points in the primary, and that's a lot statewide from a dollars and cents perspective. But you're not going to get saturation with that. You're only going to be able to drive one message. And now his opponents weren't driving any message. It was a huge advantage for him, but, with the data that I was looking at, I don't know that I would have made a different decision. In hindsight, yes, now that I know, that he had 48.9, I think he'd probably say the same thing. Had I known I was going to get 48.9, I would have
emptied the clip.
I would have emptied the clip. But then, look, you get 48.9. It's logical that you would, at that point in time, kind of, especially running against an individual like Jeff, who had a little bit of money to put into that race. But, I think Jeff was in for a total of $250,000, $350,000. Some of that was spent in the primary. Not all of it was spent, but some of it was spent. I don't know the exact numbers. So he's probably thinking, look, I'm not running against an individual who can write a large check, and I'm not running against an individual who can raise a significant amount of money in a short period of time. So logically, I think he was probably thinking, I'm going to spend some time, preparing for a general election, and I'm also, just going to spend what I have to make certain that I get through. And that's what I mean by saying we had to catch some breaks too, because I think David went on TV around July 1st in the runoff, and I think had he been on TV a week earlier, I don't think we could have won, because we won a razor thin race.
Yeah, it was like the size of a high school.
Yeah, and we went on TV at the same time. Now, his buy was bigger than ours, so more people saw his ads, but Jeff was able to go up on TV on July 1st as well, or right around a day or two around July 1st, and then we
and you don't come down.
And you don't come down, and we caught momentum late, and we were able to to ride the wave into into that race and really shock the political world and winning that.
How does the conversation happen? So you clearly won.
Mm-hmm.
Which I would say to this date has to be like that's the bell cow win of your career.
Absolutely. Yeah.
How did it come about where you went to work for that office? And we have several mutual friends who did that. And how did the conversation come for you to get back onto the running an office side of things? What made you want to do it? It sounds terrible.
Well, I mean, in hindsight, I wish I didn't, Ben. But I think it just, we were we were focused on the general election, but Jeff and I also had discussions about, what November and December and January look like if he were to win, because, once you win a primary and you're the party's nominee on the ballot in November, you
get a lot more friends.
Well, not only do you get a lot more friends, but what you can control is a lot smaller. You're in many respects you're along for the ride. What we can control was small. Sarah Riggs-Amico, who we were running against, a Democrat, what she could control was very small. And so it was completely different. I mean, it was 180 different than the primary and the runoff. And so, Jeff and I just ended up having discussions, and I don't know that I can't recall if we actually kind of finalized that before the election in November or after, probably after, because we didn't want to get ahead of ourselves, but we were also very limited in a lot of the decisions we could make that were going to influence what happened. And as soon as he won the general election, then we very quickly transitioned to transitioning that office. And we're going to get sworn in early January, so we had a lot of work to do.
How would you describe working? How long did you work for him?
Did I work for Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, in an official capacity.
11 months, because I left in early December of the first year, and he didn't get sworn in until the second Tuesday in January, the first Tuesday in January, and so I worked with him for a year and a half prior. And then just short of a year. So, all told, I was with him for just under 2.5 years.
That's a long time.
It's a very long time.
What made you want to leave that post?
Leave the official office?
Yeah, as his is it a chief of staff at a state level? I would guess so.
Well, look, I mean, it and I've been very, vocal about this on my social media channels. I think he changed. When he became lieutenant governor, he was not the person that he was when he was a candidate. When he was a candidate, he was a hard worker and a good listener. And then he became lieutenant governor, and I think he became very complacent, and he became somebody who knew all the answers to everything. And part of it, Ben, I think, stems from the fact that the job just didn't meet his expectations.
In what way?
Jeff's a big ideas guy, and I think if he was, he and I have had our disagreements, but I think if he was sitting here at the table, he would agree with that assessment that he's a big ideas guy. But being lieutenant governor is not about being a big ideas guy, right?
It's about herding cats.
It's about herding cats and blocking and tackling, and it's about doing the things that you have to do to run the Senate, and you have to manage that caucus, the Senate Republican caucus, without being a member of the Senate Republican caucus. And that's the big distinction between a lieutenant governor in Georgia and a Speaker of the House in Georgia. Speaker of the House is a member of his or her caucus. David Schaefer is elected by his caucus to be the leader, to run for Speaker on the floor, and he does that. Lieutenant governor is elected by the voters of Georgia. So when you get in there, there's a lot of people, a lot of Republicans that are going, damn, I wish I would have run for that position, and the power that the lieutenant governor in Georgia has is all derived by the Senate rules, 100%. So, and so from an expectations perspective, I think Jeff got in and said he thought two things. Number one, I'm going to bring big ideas to this place and change it, and it just didn't happen, and he also thought that big ideas could sell themselves, and it just doesn't work that way. If you're gonna try to get, I say this all the time, and I say it respectfully to my friends who are in elected office, and you can appreciate this a little bit too, especially when you're in the legislature. Most people who are in the House and the Senate, their goal when they go to session is for their phone not to ring very much, because if their phone's ringing back home, that means a constituent group at the Capitol is calling members in their districts, telling them vote against this, vote against this. Very rarely do they call them and say, "Hey, man,
great job,
great job, you got to vote for it." So if their phone's ringing, it's normally people who are asking them to vote against something. And so, if you want to get something done and you want to lead, and Jeff wanted to get something done and he wanted to lead, you need to spend the time to build relationships with Republicans in the caucus, because you're going to have to ask them, "Hey, I really need your vote on this. I really need you to vote different than what you're hearing back home." And Jeff didn't believe, in my opinion, that's how things should get done. He just thought, I'm going to come up with good ideas. They'll sell themselves. And I don't really have to spend the time and put in the time to build relationships with these members. And it's never worked that way.
And I would say this, never having sat down there a day, but you see people take the CEO or COO role of a caucus or party or city or county and not be able to rise to the occasion. Sure. Because you still I don't know. I've spoken to, the lieutenant governor 2 times. Mm-hmm. Always been really nice to me. I would never say anything otherwise than that. But leading is hard.
Oh, and it's time consuming.
And it's time consuming, and you have to be able to find, whether it's 4 people or 71 people or whatever that number is, you have to know that on some level you owe them something, and the day that you arrive is the day that consensus building begins. And they need you fundraising, and you have to go do all the heavy lifting bullshit.
Yeah.
And to his point, I think that there are a ton. I've always said that I would never in a million years. I'm the same way. I love the big ideas, and if you talk to any of the people I have sat with on the city council, they'll tell you that.
Yeah.
But sitting in that middle chair sounds fucking miserable.
Oh yeah, look, there was no coalition building at all on Jeff's behalf,
and you could tell.
Yeah, and I mean it. There was a vote in Athens before we got sworn in December to determine, what the caucus rules were going to be, and there was an effort to strip Jeff's power, and we fought that, and won by a vote of 19-15, and I knew who the 19 were who were with us, and I knew who the 15 were who were against us, and so did Jeff. And so, you fast forward to what Jeff ended up doing this cycle. I can tell you that there were 4 people who were part of those 19 who we would have never gotten to 19 had they not gotten out and stuck their necks out on the line for us. And that's Burt Jones, it's Brandon Beach, it's Blake Tillery, it's Matt Brass. And all 4 of those individuals just this past cycle were ostensibly punished because
Stop the Steal.
And Matt Brass lost his chairmanship, Brandon lost his, Burt lost his, Blake didn't lose his chairmanship. He's chairman of a very good chairman of the Powerful Appropriations Committee, but he lost his position on committee on assignments. And you just look around. Jeff's announced he's not running for re-election now, which doesn't surprise me because, as I said, I don't think he enjoyed the job, and I don't think he's good at it. And he just didn't. He didn't build a coalition. He didn't even try, Ben. He didn't even. He almost thought that if he tried to, it was almost like in his head, if he put the effort to build a coalition, that he would be doing what other people do, and that would make him somehow less of a statesman or something.
I can see how that would, you can achieve a certain role in public life and stop backbenching the work.
That's right.
But the truth is that it is an exponential multiplier when it's you, because if you are the guy who leads a chamber, right, wrong, or indifferent, it has to be, you can still drive your vision, but when you abandon people, and I, of all those, I know Burt Jones and I know Brandon Beach, And both of those guys, I won't say both of them, Brandon Beach would do anything for me. There's not a check I couldn't ask him to write me because and I disagree with the guy on all sorts of things. If you ever forget who your friends are, you're screwed.
That's right.
And that is the mistake that you cannot ever make.
That's right.
And people do it at every level of government. And they always have and they always will because it's like, well, I'm this. And so I don't have to do that anymore.
That's right.
You got to do it 5 times more.
No question, because you can't get complacent. And because if you do, it'll come back to bite you, and it did with Jeff. I mean, he put himself in a position where he couldn't run for re-election again because he couldn't win.
Talk to me about what you think, and you're literally only on the outside, but I'll let you talk about him. I actually don't think that I think he probably likes television more than he probably should.
Yes.
But I don't necessarily disagree with what he thinks the party needs to do as a whole.
Right.
Those are not the same thing.
Very different things.
How would you say where did he pin himself to where he really couldn't run for re-election?
Two areas, I think. One we all know about and is very public, and that's how loud of a voice he was for this GOP 2.0 movement, as we've talked about, which includes being very critical of Donald Trump, very publicly, and he became a darling of CNN and was on there, a couple times a week for a matter of 3 or 4 months. And then secondly, fundraising, I think. I mean, he, in order to win re-election, you have to raise a lot of money to win statewide, and that's, he was the beneficiary of a independent political committee doing a lot of things that principal campaign committees normally do. And so that dynamic probably wasn't going to exist this time. He was going to have to do it all on his own. So, he didn't want to fundraise. And then the GOP 2.0, and I've said, Ben, too, I mean, our party's at a transition time, and that's 110% true. And I'm, I probably fit into a small category of people who believe very strongly that we only succeed in 2022 here in Georgia if we can somehow marry up the energy of the MAGA movement with those that completely disagree with a lot or everything that Donald Trump did, and we can't lose any of them, right? I mean, we can't.
Well, talk to me about what you think. Put your hat on. Step back from the Doug Collins. Step back from the, hyper partisan. I have to win the day in the primary. How do you do that?
You very carefully. I mean, the first thing you can't do, the first thing you need to realize is you have to grow. You can't tell the MAGA movement that they're stupid.
No.
And that's what I think Jeff Duncan's done.
Well, that's what if you look at your North Fulton delegation and you find them in an honest conversation, that's how they all feel.
That's right.
And you can't. I think if I were going to do it, I would sit there and say, I love almost everything that Donald Trump stood for.
Sure.
And if I was a rank and file member of Congress, I'd have been there for the whole thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, but you can't act a certain way all the time. And I think both of those things are true. But this is my agenda and this is what I want to do for you. The question is whether or not from a campaign perspective, can you do that without alienating 10% because you need them all?
I think you can, but it's going to be very difficult. And
are you telling me I should do it in 2022? And
that's where I was going with this. That's where I was heading.
Are we going to go ahead and tell everybody about what we're going to do?
That's where I was heading. I was going to leave that to you.
Are we going to tell everybody what we're going to do to John Ossoff?
I was going to leave that to you. But look, you can absolutely do it. But it's important. A message is only successful if a messenger can carry the message successfully. And I just don't think with all due respect to Jeff Duncan and the Liz Cheneys of the world and the Mitt Romneys of the world,
they're
the wrong messengers from that.
But they're good Republicans.
Absolutely, but they're the wrong messengers, I think, to marry up.
You don't always have to come out early.
No, and so is there somebody that I think can do that? Yeah, I'm confident we can do that. But I also think, Ben, that the biggest problem we have right now here is that we're still fighting amongst ourselves, and I'm not the one, and you're not the one. There's no one person. Well, there might be one person, but in Georgia, there's no one person that can say, enough of this. Let's all get together. We won't do that until until Stacey Abrams announces her candidacy, or she doesn't announce her candidacy, and there's a crowded race to succeed her. I think she runs. I'm not buying the fact that she's not running.
No,
but there are a few people out there that believe she's making so much money that she might not run. But I think she runs, and when she does, all of a sudden, that can unite the party faster than anything that we can do internally.
I think that all those things are true, and I think she's a charlatan. It's like the whole voting rights conversation it's even more disingenuous than the abortion conversation in this country. I'm not going to sit here and say that there aren't people with legitimate gripes about certain things. I've never, and I vote all the time, I've never seen anything that is more of a manufactured crisis in my lifetime. And I don't know that I will. It's like, and people, the thing that and I'm telling you at home, if you're sitting here running, people believe what they're told. Ask yourself the second question and ask yourself if you've ever seen it before. And I've got people that listen to me all over the country. And somebody's going to write back and be like, I saw it here. Well, I mean, I'm not telling you. I'm the non-absolutes guy. Mm-hmm. But I think if you say, look, I think Donald Trump was good for taxes. I think Donald Trump was really good on foreign policy because there is the first one in a long time that didn't start an international conflict.
Sure.
There's value in that.
You bet.
Our service members are tired.
Yeah.
And I think that there are a bunch of good things. And I think, hey, guys, I want all of you. I don't care how he acted. And I do think that he was complicit in January 6th. And I bet if you go home and sit in the confines of your basement, you do too. Mm-hmm. But you can't say it. And I think the longer you get the Marjorie Taylor Greenes out for hour-long interviews where you really make her talk about her body of work and what she sees and thinks and feels, I have no doubt that the party has better ideas.
Good luck getting her to sit down for an hour. Now, I think your staff's going to put a kibosh on that.
I can get her back. I can get her back.
I wish you luck.
I need
luck to do that. That would certainly be a podcast that I would listen to.
I would eat her lunch. Well, I want to thank. What's next for you, man? You got anything coming this cycle?
Well,
besides our big Ossoff race.
Well, I was going to wait for you to make that announcement, but
it's next.
No, I am venturing into a space outside the confines of politics, which is something that I've wanted to do for a long, long time. By mid-July or early August, I will be rolling out a new company. A freight brokerage company that has nothing to do with campaigns and elections. It's something, as I said, I've been looking at doing for 5 or 6 years. I've always kind of kept my head down and said, what could I do if I end up kind of getting out of politics? And freight brokerage and freight and logistics has been an industry that I've always paid close attention to. A freight broker, puts together shippers and motor carriers. And I'm really excited about it. Rapid Fire Freight, LLC, will be the company. And working on marketing materials and a website right now. And I'm actually, as soon as I leave here, I'm heading up to meet with one of the biggest freight brokers in the country who's up in the northern part of Georgia. And, I'm still going to be involved in politics. I joke with everybody I'm going to be a campaign mouse. I'm going to mouse around and kind of all the campaigns. I haven't called to tell him yet, but Jim Kingston's a good friend of mine, and I've always admired how Jim has been able to stay involved politically and in campaigns, while he's running a business outside outside of campaigns and elections. And so I'm going to do that. I still am going to stay very involved, Ben, in what happens because I can now do it kind of the way I want to do it and enjoy it. And so it's going to be a very busy cycle. And even though I'm not going to be involved in the cycle as a consultant, as a paid consultant, I'm going to be involved in the cycle as a volunteer. And I'm really looking forward to that because I haven't done that in a long, long time.
So we'll close here, and I'm going to make you hang on until the end. But I think I think I know the message to beat Ossoff. Are you ready?
Warnock, you mean?
Yeah.
Well,
I don't know. I may.
Ossoff's not on the ballot for another 5.5 years.
I may have to. No, well, yeah, it's different.
It could be the same message that beats them both.
Well, I think there's a lot of things. It's super insightful to listen to somebody who's worked at so many different levels of government, who is truly ready to kind of not move on, but you're October and November. I mean, I'm sure, your kids are like
intense.
Is he still, is he here?
Yeah,
Well, Chip Lake, you're a great American.
Thank you.
What's your Twitter handle?
At Lake Chip. Really simple.
You're, the two of us have a good old time on the social media, but I will,
yes, indeed.
I'll leave you here. I want to thank Chiringa for stopping in. You guys go leave me a review. Send me the screenshot. Get in my DMs. Actually, you got to be careful about what you DM people.
You do.
So you just don't ever you don't ever want any scandalousness. No less. I'll cut it off here. I appreciate Carl, App and Media, for letting me host. And I want to thank Chiringa for jumping on to season 4. You guys have a great day, everybody.